All right, let's just start. I gave him a little bit of my background while we were waiting. So you can go to the next slide here and give him a little bit about you.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Virginia, and I am a recently retired employee of the Postal Service. I worked as postmaster. I've worked in district offices. I've worked in the plant as a supervisor, as a manager. I've worked in customer service, supervisor, manager, and in so many different fields. I've also had some experience outside the Postal Service as HR director. So we're hoping to bring the knowledge and skills that we've learned over this combined 50 years of experience to you today. And I hope you guys get something out of it. Thanks for joining. So here's a little picture proof. One of our NSP classes here. We really have a passion for people who want to move up in the organization. And we have a passion of changing cultures, and some of our cultures in our organization and our different companies, are less than positive. And we believe that we can be the change. You can be the change one person at a time, and it starts with you. So we're trying to bring our passion of having these great work experiences, because let's face it, we're with our work people more than we are with our families. So let's make it awesome, right? Nanette, you got anything?
Well, I've already given him my spiel, but I think one of the biggest things for Virginia and I is we have a heart for people. We know what the struggle is for the employees, and we want to make a great environment for the employees. Just because you're moving from employee to supervisor or management doesn't mean that you can't make it great for the employees too. So that's where our heart is.
Right. And we know that we didn't have help when we needed it. I know I didn't have help when I needed it. If you guys have someone who's out there helping you move along in your company and grow, God bless them. But I know that I was scratching and trying to figure it out on my own. So we figured, let's do this. Let's be there for people and serve you. And that's what we hope to do today. So what we're going to learn today, where we're going to attempt to show you guys, is what you need to know before you start writing your KSAs, before you start the dread of applying for this job that you really want to do and you have all the nerves. We're going to give you some tips and give you some good advice, hopefully, so that you can get over that hurdle and represent yourself the way that you are and highlight yourself in this amazing person that you are. Now, the big part of it is preparation. Preparation is absolutely the key. So in the chat real quickly, I want to know how many of you have waited until the day before something has closed to decide to apply for or work out your KSAs or start writing, that you've waited for the day of or the day before. So just share in the chat if you don't mind.
I've done that. No.
I've definitely done it. Let's see here. Newbie here, can you identify what a KSA is? A KSA it's your knowledge, skills, and ability. And it's a way you represent yourself when a job has requirements. Very specifically for federal government positions and government positions, they will list very specific requirements and will want you to actually address these requirements to prove that you have what it takes to get that interview. We're going to say that preparation is definitely key. And what we want to do is let's go ahead and just show you how to start. Nanette?
Yeah. So how do you start? Well, a well-written profile is what stands between you and your dream job. So first of all, you got to look at the job announcement and you have to really understand what they're looking for. And of course, like Virginia just said, you have to note the date of the closing. Do not wait until the last minute to start going in there and writing your knowledge, skills, and abilities or your resume. You want to go ahead and start working on it as soon as you find out about the job. And even before then, if you're waiting on a specific job, find out what those requirements are ahead of time and start preparing in far advance as you can. And don't confuse the duties and responsibilities with the requirements. Sometimes, and over the years, Virginia and I both have read probably thousands and thousands of resumes and applications. And one thing that people do is they start talking about the duties and responsibilities and how they could do those things instead of addressing what the actual requirements are.
Yeah, that's really a big deal. It breaks your heart And as a person who's reviewing these and has reviewed them, I try to still find the requirements in that piece of it. But at some point, if I can't find it, I can't identify it throughout your entire application, we'll talk about the matrix a little more later. But you get a 0 on the matrix, and then that's kind of done time for you. Something else we want to think about before you start is working on spelling and grammar errors. They seem like that shouldn't be a big deal, but that can be a major turnoff because you don't know who the person is who's going to be reading your application. Also, we want to say is keep a journal. Like, you do amazing things every day, and a lot of the times you're doing it on autopilot. You're doing it on autopilot just because you're trying to survive. So you're trying to get through your workday, right? So if you're doing that, keep a journal, a work journal of all the things. And when you do something amazing, make a small note of it. One of the things I liked to do is if I got a kudo on an email, I created an archive that was like, Virginia kudos. And I will just store that email into the kudo file so that when I needed to apply for a job, it's available to me. Because what will always happen and inevitably will happen to me is that I will blank out about anything I've done. Like, I will read a requirement and it'll be like how to communicate. And I'll be like, how do you communicate? What does this mean? And it's so basic and simple, but you forget about anything that's outstanding. So use that as a reminder for yourself. Either do a work journal. There's so many different things that you can do. At one point early in my career, I got one of those accordion type folders. And what I had done is that I labeled it out, communication, or this, just a different topic. And I printed out those emails. I killed a lot of trees, sorry, but I did. And I just put them in there. And I would just put them in there and kind of use them. And it also helped me with the date and time so I can recall the situation. So when I'm writing about it, I had some depth and something to use to reference. Also, just one more thing is be very critical about the words that you use. And we're going to get into that a little more in a moment. But you want to be critical about the words that you use and look at them and try to remove words that create
confusion for one, or
Yes.
unnecessary. A lot of times when we're reading applications, they give us way too much information. Like sometimes we get the color of the lady's shirt that was standing at the counter and things like that. Make sure that you're just getting to the meat of the issue, because a lot of resumes are very wordy and you have to limit the number of words you use. So only the necessary items need to be in there, and try not to repeat yourself.
Absolutely. And if you are applying for jobs in the government, know the rules here listed on this slide. We have the EL 312, which is an employee placement manual specifically for the U.S. Postal Service. I just added that on there because we seem to get a higher response from people in the Postal Service to our meeting here, which is understandable. But just know the rules for that company. You're applying for a job. Deep dive into that company and check them out. Check out their website. Check out the way they talk. Check out the words they use. What's their go language? So prepare yourself with all of this information before you start to actually write down your KSA. And now we're going to talk and move over into the next slide about the framework for your KSA and how to do that.
So with combined 50 years experience, Virginia and I have both applied for a lot of jobs. So we get to be professional at it. And what we've learned over the years is how to create an outstanding KSA. And we have a framework for that, and how we worked. As Virginia's already talked about that a little bit. Instead of starting with the list of requirements, we start with all the kudos and the accomplishments. So the number one thing you do when you get ready to write a resume is start with the good stuff. Look at any emails that you got a kudo for to get ideas. Think of any awards you've gotten and just brainstorm those ideas. And if you have been taking notes and you have a journal, you should have great stuff already in there. And you're going to use those situations to create a star. And a star it's the way that when you put forth the requirement, you're hitting everything and you're proving that you actually understand the requirement. And what you do with that is you do a situation, a task, an action, and result. And you're going to write all your accomplishments in that method. And we're going to go into that a little bit later in the presentation. And you're going to repeat this process for every accomplishment. So when you get ready to do a job application, if you don't already have your notes, you just get out there and you start writing all your accomplishments down. You just create this plethora of good stuff that you've done. And then after you have that list of all the great things that you've accomplished and all your accomplishments, you're going to go to number 2, which is where does it fit into the requirements? So we have a sample of a list of requirements that Virginia is going to show you real quick. And what you'll do is you'll take that scenario, say it's a customer service scenario, and you're going to look through all the requirements, read them individually from beginning to end, and make sure you understand what they're looking for. And then put a notation. We use the number. And what does that scenario that you have, or that kudo, which one of these 10 things could it fall into? And that's one of the misconceptions about postal KSAs is you don't have to write a different scenario for each one of these KSAs. One situation could cover a plethora of these, and you can demonstrate a few or all of these things in some of your KSAs. So if you go back to the other screen, so you're going to write down every number from the requirements that are answered by this star that you created. And then number 3, you're just going to review that KSA that was addressed. You're going to proofread. You're going to make sure that you addressed every KSA in your application. And then you're going to have to minimize your characters, because when you write all this great stuff, sometimes you have too many words, and you're going to have to just shrink those words down. And then you're going to read it again, and then you're going to have somebody else read it and get some feedback. And that'll give you a framework. And we're going to go into this deeper as we go through, but that's just the basic framework of how to create that application. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this before we go on?
Let's pause for that. Let's definitely. And if you could do this on the Zoom meeting, there's an option there to raise your hand. So if you can just raise your hand, and then we'll call you and you unmute yourself and ask the question. And there's no dumb questions. Everyone's got a question. It's just sometimes it takes a minute to get there. So let's stop and talk about the framework. So Eddie says, is there any general feeling on one-page resumes? Okay, so Nanette and I were talking about this earlier about the confusion that I think a lot of people have between resumes and CV. I definitely had that because I spent the majority of my life working for the government. So we never had to really do a resume. We have a resident expert on the call. So I want to do a little shout out to Courtney. She is a resume expert here because our experience is mostly in government. So Courtney blessed us with her presence, so she can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that resumes should essentially be one-liners and should reference the needs and the requirements of the specific job that you're applying for, which is different than a CV, where a CV could be unlimited pages and it's like this duration of it's like your lifetime of work achievement. So certain jobs want CVs, other ones want resumes. That's always been my understanding. So Eddie, I don't know if that really answers your question, but yes, he gave me a thumbs up that it does. And then now I need some verification. I need validation is what I need. Courtney, am I on the right page here?
That's so kind of you. I would say from mentors and the feedback that I've gotten is that you're really driving value in your resume or your CV. It's value instead of just trying to fill space, and kind of echoing what Nanette and Virginia have been saying. If what you have in your 1-page resume or your 3-page resume is a value add that communicates what you're going to add to the organization and the position, then that seems completely relevant to me. But if it's just taking up space to prove that you've had a work history for 15 years, I think you kind of lose credibility as you go through. But I love this framework. So my experience is I also have a really long resume, and I kind of go through this all the time, but I really go through it line by line to see, okay, are these bullet points, is this adding value to the job that I want? If it doesn't, then it doesn't really need to be there. And that's been my experience in either the resume, excuse me, or the CV.
That is Absolutely perfect. I hope you guys took that in. So the key right there, the question you should ask yourself is, does it add value? Love that.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That was amazing. Antonio, can you use the language from the job announcement? Some say you can't. I'm going to say absolutely. And I know some say you can't because in their mind it's cheating because they can't give you a 0 on a matrix. So I'm going to say yes. If I'm going to flip over to the next slide here, and just this happens to be, for those of you who are not Postal, I apologize, but this is the example I pulled just because a lot of the interest was for this particular position. But what I would definitely do is somehow use the words that are in here as a start, definitely reuse those as a start. But we're going to get into that and get into a list of words and things in a way to frame this so that, yes, you can use it as a start, but you won't have to. But if you're in a critical situation, like right now you're joining because it's closing tonight at midnight, you might need to do that, because then you don't want the 0 scores you out whenever you're looking for an interview for any kind of government position. If you don't demonstrate somewhere in there that you have met this qualification requirement in some kind of writing form somewhere on your application, they will give you the 0, and we'll talk about that more. Antonio, does that answer your question? Give me a thumbs up or a yes, or unmute. Yes. Okay.
Well,
All
and
right.
let me just add to that, because in reviewing these, I mean, I've reviewed them where the language is the same. The key, though, in scoring it is what your result is. So you can use the same language to get the basis and the foundation, but you're going to get the score based on what your result was in your star format. And Virginia's going to go into that. So that kind of is like how, because I respect that, because I've done all mine from that language, and then I go and do what Virginia's going to talk about right here.
I'll say this. I personally had applied for a position that had a requirement that I had to be willing to drive from like point A to point B. I'm like, how do I do that? So I was like, I am willing to drive. Like, what kind of star am I writing on that one? Well, every day of my life, I like to go to the grocery store. And I've proven that I like to drive. And as a result, I am overweight.
So yeah. So there are some KSAs that you have to use the language. It's in there. Like they're physically asking you that.
Right.
So that was a great star, though. I like that.
Okay. So we have a sample star / KSA that's written here, and we can read it together. And then once we read it together, I'd like to know what you guys think of it in the chat, whether you believe it's a strong KSA, or you can even just score it for us between a 0 and a 3. So let me go with it. I'll read it to you all. I understand you can read, but I'll just go with it too. As a customer service representative at XYZ Corp, I was responsible for handling customer inquiries and complaints. My task was to ensure that all customer inquiries were resolved quickly and efficiently. I responded to customer inquiries via phone and email and worked with my team to resolve any issues or complaints. As a result of my efforts, customer satisfaction increased and the company received positive feedback from customers. So in the chat, if you will share, either score it or yes or no, and let me know what you think, if you believe that this is a strong KSA. Don't be shy. Okay, Eddie gave a thumbs up. Becky, Dr. Gail, what do you guys think?
Becky said yes. Antonio said yes. We got all positives.
Okay, all positives. Okay, which to the untrained eye, it would appear that way. And to the ones who are reviewing your applicants, and you're applying for a job and it's competitive, you could have 100 to 200 people applying for some of these key jobs that you see out there, but this is a false star. And why this is a false start is that it lacks, what you can see in the beginning is that it lacks any metrics. It doesn't have any kind of measurement to go against. So you see that there's no measurement, and it also doesn't have any like grand accomplishment that relates back to any action that you took. So you responded to customer inquiries via phone and email, and you worked with your team. How do we know that your response to these customer inquiries and these phone calls actually resulted in customer satisfaction increase? How did you measure the customer satisfaction increase? Was there a tool that measures that? So because it lacked the metrics, it lacked a measurement, it didn't associate your action to the results. It felt like it did. The words seemed like good as a base, and you could use something like this to start, but then go in and add the metrics, relate them, show me how the action you specifically took resulted in this positive thing. You don't want to be fifth place. You want to go ahead. There's only one job and you want it and you deserve it and you need to get that interview. So we're going to go into the next piece here, and a couple of tips I want to say before we go into a real star. Be aware of saying what you would have done. When you move from an hourly to a salary employee, that movement, there's a lot of experience and a lot of things that are not, you don't really know until you're there. So you will write all the things that you would have done. You know, I've got bosses that were terrible, and if I were them, I would have done all these things that it probably would have resulted in something amazing. Just make sure that you don't do that. You don't write what you would have done. And also, if there was a job or a task that you were doing, shared along with somebody else. So if Nanette and I were working on a project together and we're writing our resume, I am not going to say we. I'm going to say I, and I'm going to talk about what I did in it. Don't worry about the fact that other people joined you in the success of this project. So how many of you have felt uncomfortable with that? You put it in the chat. Do you feel like because I was in with somebody else, it's not completely true? Is that the kind of thoughts that we're doing? Do you guys, or you can do like an emoji hand or whatever. Have you guys experienced that? Like, it's kind of like imposter syndrome. I'm going to take from your body language that you have.
And Antonio has a question. What if there isn't a metric available? What do you do?
If there isn't a metric available, we're going to find another amazing thing you did to prove that you're qualified for that job. Okay. We're going to discuss that. We'll bring that back. Make a note of that. Don't let me leave you without that. Okay. Because it's hard to say that if there's not a metric available, then you're going to have to find another thing that you did that's amazing, basically, is what it is. So if you have an example you want to share, something that you might do, because then maybe I can help you further along that way. You can unmute, or can you not unmute? Do I have to unmute you?
He's trying.
Okay.
Hey, thank you. Good morning. I just got some of the questions on the KSA don't have, how can I say, like I raised the profit by a certain amount or put the percentage down. So what do you do? How do you demonstrate that without a metric available? Is the question.
Okay, so go ahead, Annette.
I think what he's trying to say is like communication, like there's not a number associated with it. Is that what you're trying to say? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so in something like communication, what you would have to do is come up with a method or a way that you have communicated that has resulted in something that, even if it's not particularly measurable, like it could be something that I'm trying to come off the cuff here, and I'm not very good at off the cuff, but if I was new, say I was a new supervisor, and I communicate, like there was an employee who had a problem or a customer who had a problem, and I solved the employee's problem, missing package, something like that. I'm going to now use that, even though that feels like it's a KSA for solving a customer's problem. It's also communication, because you're going to say that not only did I spoke with them, I called them back, I emailed them, I followed up. So now you're starting to focus a little more on the ways you communicated. And the result was that I found the package for the customer and they were very grateful for it and have a better understanding of the postal service. So it would have to be something in that sense. If it's not particularly measurable, I'm usually better at these kinds of examples right now, but for some reason I'm having brain fog.
Well, basically what Virginia is saying is the measure, maybe it's not a number, but maybe it falls within the vision of the company. Because what she's saying is the vision of the company is to have customer service and to make sure that we have a good public image. So those are also ways that we measure it, is like the tangible things, not just the numbers. Is that what you're trying to say, Virginia?
Yes, like it doesn't necessarily have to be a report, is what I'm trying to say. It could be something as, well, at the end of that, solving that person's problem, you asked them if they wanted to fill out the survey, and then you got that survey result back and they were happy with the effort that I gave in helping locate their package in that fake scenario I just created.
And
So-
Courtney's also chiming in here to help us out since we're stuttering over our words here.
Yeah, we are stuttering.
And
I think we had a question for that too. In
Oh.
instances where I haven't had metrics to support my work, I described how it prompted different action and impacted the customer and end user. Try to remember to address the question. How is my behavior influencing or impacting my customers in a way that improves their outcomes? See, that is perfect. I think you guys should take a snippet of that. Telling you, we know people, we're connected. Courtney is it. Thank you, Courtney, for that. So there was a question before, I believe, I'm sorry if I missed it. As a writer, I've tried to avoid using I, but you have no choice here when you're selling yourself the job. That's true. In this situation, I say I, definitely. I think that being humble when you're trying to sell yourself on paper is a bad idea. And I struggled with that myself because I'm like, well, I'm just like everybody else, but I need to get that interview. So I need to be unlike everybody else. And then once I get that interview, they're going to talk to me and see that I'm this dynamic powerhouse. And why wouldn't you want to hire me? I'll do anything for you and I'll make you laugh. So that is what you want to do. You want to get the I statements out there and flourish yourself. And what if the metrics are proprietary? Well, I guess at this point you would, I've never experienced that. The metrics are usually something that are accessible if you're already within the organization and it's not really going outside of the organization. But if you're moving from one to another, I would just be careful about what you are allowed to or not allowed to share. And again, like knowledge is power. I would read that and decide, well, am I allowed to share this or am I not allowed to share this? And then maybe at some point you could, instead of being a specific, use a percentage and do something in that nature if you're writing out your results. But that's a good question. I haven't experienced that personally, but I'm sure there's some positions out there that you, in medical probably, that you can't share, maybe some overall type thing. All right.
And then
Ed, go ahead.
Eddie has a good question. Similarly, could you create your own metric? Like I try to solve customer problems within 24 hours. I accomplish my goal 90% of the time. I do, yes, because that shows, like for me, as somebody who's reviewing your application, that shows you've created your own goal that we didn't even create for you. That is definitely something that I would say, yep, I would put that right up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's wonderful because when you get the interview, because that's how you're writing, when you get the interview, I'm definitely going to ask you this question because I want to know more about that because you took an initiative outside of what's readily available. Definitely. That was a great question. All right. So let's move forward here and we're going to just discuss what a real star is. So this is just basically the same type of scenario before with the false star and what a real star looks like. I'll read it to you just in case the print's small, but I recognize all of you are capable of reading. So in this situation, the situation is during my previous job, I noticed a significant decrease in customer satisfaction ratings. As a customer service representative, I was tasked with improving customer satisfaction and increasing positive feedback. So I implemented a new training program for all customer service representatives, focusing on active listening and empathy. I also created a feedback system for customers to easily provide their thoughts and suggestions. Within 3 months, our customer satisfaction ratings were improved by 25%, and we received significant increase of positive feedback. The key words in here are, I created a feedback system, which goes right in line with what Eddie was saying. So they focused, they had active listening. These are really good words that you want to use, and that helps a person stand out. So I'll leave it here for just a quick second if you guys want to take a snippet or something of this example, but this is like a very good action and has the words to stand out, to shine. So moving on to that subject, what we want to do, I'm going to throw this to Nanette, is avoid overused and weak verbs.
Right. And we talked about this a little bit before. And especially when you're reviewing 200 applications for one job, if you hear I participated in every single scenario I participated in, or I was responsible for, it doesn't make you stand out. Not only that, we get tired of hearing it. I'm responsible for, you be creative in that and try to paint a better picture, because what we're doing when we're reading applications is we're thinking about how creative you are and how innovative you are and what you're adding to it. And when you give us better words, like on the next screen here, it gives us a better picture and a better visual in our head of what you look like working and what you would be for the company. So you can use your thesaurus will be your best friend when you're writing a resume, because there's better ways to say it, better ways to say almost every word, or a different way to say it, and what word fits in that scenario.
Right. And we're not saying that, I wanted to emphasize, we're not saying that you can't use these other words, and we're not saying that these are the only list of words. These were just the ones that we liked, and we presented them here to you in our limited time frame. But we're just saying that these were very commonly, on the previous slide, were commonly overused. Yes. And the goal is to stand out. The goal is to say, look at me and get that interview. So again, humility and feeling like, oh, shy, no, blow up, glow up. And if you can't do it for yourself, think of the person you think is the most absolute amazing person that shares characteristics with you. Write about them, but it's really you. Okay. So whatever that mental game is that we play with ourselves, where we are self-sabotage, and that's definitely something that Nanette and I've been working on for at least over a year, is not to self-sabotage. It just becomes this weird habit. And why do that? You guys are literally amazing. Like, you took the effort on a random Tuesday to join us here. And I think that's amazing. I think that is wonderful. And I certainly appreciate it. And we hope we're giving back to you on that.
And again, I want to repeat what Virginia said. We're not saying don't use the word on the previous slide ever. We're just saying be careful in how you use them and how often you use them.
Right.
Because there's going to be a time when you have to use the word responsible. It's going to come up.
Yeah. And moving on to, I gave a sample here of 40 wonderful adjectives. And the reason this came about is because if I had to read another resume that tells me that you're very good and that you're very amazing and that you're very this or very that, I want you to expand your vocabulary. Very is a weak adjective. I would like us to use stronger words. Again, these are just an alphabetical list of 40 sample adjectives. Let's replace the word very, and we can still be simple and communicate what we are trying to say without sounding pretentious, but adding a few words that we have some stronger vernacular. And the dictionary has amazing words. I mean, I used to do this thing where I would list all these words and I'm like, oh, this is the fun word. And why not use it? Someone went through a lot of effort to write that dictionary for you. Let's give them some attention.
Yeah. And if you go back to the framework and you're writing your situations out first and you're laying those out, you can go back and look at these adjectives or even any other ones and see where you can add those in to make it better and make us as readers understand better what you're trying to convey. I mean, that's just a way to kind of add the frills.
Yes. Add the glitter. We want you to add the glitter, because I'm going to remember you. I'm reading 100 of these, and in the outside private industry, they may not be reading 100 of them. It's going to be an AI that's reading them and looking for keywords and it's popping them out. But in an institution like government institutions that are antiquated, as we all know,
We're reading all 200 of them. Like the one
are
we had
human.
220 one time. We're like, what? There's not even a way to, we're like looking for zeros just so we don't have to read the whole thing.
Absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. I've done that. I've actually, as a review board, I have gone through, I'm like, let me look for the slacker who did this 2 hours before it was closing. And that's what you're trying to do, because it's at that point, it's a manual position. It's a manual work, not
Yeah.
AI. I'm going to pass the ball to Nanette, and she's going to share our best resume writing tips.
So we were putting this presentation together. We were trying to think of all the things that worked well for us. And one of them was see a need, fill a need. And that goes back to that very first thing on the framework is when you have great things to put on your resume or in your KSAs, that makes making your resume really easy. So, and we said be a star because you're going to, as you're doing great things within your organization that you're currently in, you're going to start making a journal of those things and keep writing those things down. And if you see something, because you have a job application that you've done before, and you're like, oh, I need more things on safety, be more aware of it, see the need for safety, fill the need, and then use that for your star in your upcoming resumes. Avoid vague terms like detail oriented or hard worker. And when we say vague, we mean be more specific, use those adjectives, use those hard hitting verbs. Cite instances that your skills benefited your team or employer. Like Courtney said earlier, does it add value? So make sure that whatever you're putting out there, that was a golden nugget, shall we say, to make sure that whatever you're putting out there, does it benefit and add value to your team or your business employer? And then for those people that are doing resumes and those one pagers, like Eddie talked about, make your contact information more prominent, make sure you're easy access. You can use bullet points for better readability, and then make sure that your templates are clean when you start so you don't have any stray information on there. Do you have anything to add to that, Virginia?
Yes, I'm going to stress the templates, like reusing an old template, because sometimes we're not good at cleaning that up. I had an instance where I had an employee who was in an accident, and the police officer used an old report and tried to write over it, and then it had the wrong name on there and the wrong date. So we can do that as accidentally. So if you have an option to start from a new template, do that. Don't be afraid of it. Give yourself time. We've learned that we're going to prepare ourselves. So you want to stop those little errors there. And that's just the small things that people are looking for. And that's pretty much it. I know that we had a lot of requests from postal employees. I'm not sure. I don't remember who all is postal, but for those of you who have joined us in that governmental role, we recognize that you don't really have a resume. Your resume is what they call an e-career profile. And that profile consists of these different breakdown areas. I added this on here because I wanted to say that each one of these areas of information is an opportunity for you to shine. So it's an opportunity for you to highlight the value that you bring to your organization or the job that you're applying for. So I just wanted to throw that out there and add one more piece of information for the governmental. And I apologize if not everyone's relating to this, but now you have the inside view of how the government works, right? We have a misunderstanding where the summary of accomplishments is where you write all of your KSAs for these knowledge and requirements. And if you remember from a few slides ago, there was 10 things written on there. So how are you going to possibly put all of that in there? And when you only have a 6,000 character limit. So my advice and my takeaway from this particular slide is when you're applying for any job, whether it's intern, private industry, or government, my advice is going to be that you read, learn, and become the expert of what their requirements are. All industries have employee manuals. Some, if they're publicly traded, I think they have to have that information out in the public so you can go and find it from their corporate pages. Learn, and it's how you become the expert in everything. It has helped me a lot in my career that people would come to me and like, oh, Virginia, you're the expert. I'm literally was only the expert because I took the time to read. I took the time to learn. So find something that's interesting to you and then be the expert in that because it's readily available. For those of you who are applying for postal type jobs, I wanted to just prove that many reviewers believe that each requirement has to be addressed individually. And Nanette's already gone into that, how you can put the number one, this star is identifying KSA 1, 3, 6, and 9. I'm addressing in one star, I've touched these. Sometimes I put it out there for them so they actually know. So like there's no doubt in their mind that I'm telling you that this star is talking about the KSA 1, 3, 6, and 9. But I wanted to prove to you the importance of reading, because in this employee and placement manual, it clearly states that applicants are not required to address each KSA individually in a narrative description. So what it's saying, which this company for 200 years has probably been telling people that they have to do it individually. You don't have to do it individually. You can combine them, because the truth is any action you're taking in your company and helping your customers or helping your internal customers, these actions take a variety of things to do. They take initiative, they take communication, they take personal acumen. These are all things that you're doing to solve the problem that you face in your workplace. So I'm going to kick it over to Nanette. She's going to have a little discussion about rating our applicants and the importance of meeting that star.
So for the federal applications, there is a 3-point scoring system. Actually, it's 4 points because you can get a 0. And how we score those is, and we've talked about the 0. If you get a 0 on any one of the requirements that's listed in that job, then you're automatically thrown out and your application is no longer considered. Minimally accepted would go back to just repeating back probably the requirement and just saying, I know this. That's usually, and that's just when people use the language Eddie talked about earlier. A lot of times that's what you're getting is when you're using the language from the thing, and that's all you're putting with nothing, no results. And you're just saying, I know this, blah, 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 blah. Then that's usually when you get the 1 point. For 2 points, that's when you can demonstrate the knowledge, you have the skill with the action, and then you have a result that's measurable, and that's strong. And that's what we give 2 points for. Now, as far as excellent, how do you get a 3-pointer? Well, a 3-pointer would go back to something that you add value to. It almost go back to what Eddie was talking about, where he said, I just created this new thing and I'm doing the goals myself. It's something where you go out and beyond what the mainstream requirements are. And we're looking for innovation in there. We're looking for something new to make us think about things different. So that gets us to our vision of our mission of the company. I can say I very rarely have ever given out 3 points in any scaling matrix. And if Virginia goes to the next slide, we'll show you what the matrix looks like and how it's scored. So for each KSA, they're listed across the top. And then for the applicants, we're going to score between 0 and 3 for each one of those. And go ahead, Virginia.
So what I wanted to point out here was I am on a review board and I have 100 applicants. So now I'm going through and I'm scoring each one of them. Has this person met this? Has this person met this? And as I'm going through, this exhibit is quite generous to applicant 2.
They like them, yeah.
Very rare situation. I wanted to go down to applicant 5. So applicant 5, they addressed KSA number 1 really well. The knowledge of statistical analysis, they got a 2. That's a good score. But what happened there is as soon as they got to KSA 2, the people reading your application, reading your resume, could not find where you demonstrated that you had the knowledge of this public relations or any other media outlets. So they immediately scored you with a 0. And since you immediately scored you with a 0, even if you are the best at the KSA 3, 4, 5, and like no one's better than you, and this is your one little weakness, and it seems unfair, you're zeroed out. They're not reading any longer. And I recognize it's an antiquated system, but it's the system that's used. And because this is what it is, and there's really no control of that, what you need to do is make sure that you don't get a 0. So that's what you can control. Don't get a 0, even if it would have been, I have knowledge of public relations in various media outlets. I'm at least getting a 1.
Yeah.
You know, even, and that goes back to what Antonio was saying. It's not the greatest thing to say, but at that situation, if you knew that you really wasn't your strength, but you were really killing it in 3, 4, and 5, just do something to not get the 0. So that's the takeaway for here. Do something to not get the 0. Now you know how they score you.
And 3s and 1s, and well, 0s are the most important, but 3s and 1s are very important when you're doing the matrix, because when you're scoring 200 people and everybody's getting a lot of 2s because they're showing metrics, the ones that you don't show the metric on, or the ones that you outstand, really puts you in the top 3 to 5 people for that interview. So those are really, really big.
That is such a good point. So there have been countless times where I'm going through this matrix and the scores are 31, 31, 31, 30, 30, 29. So it just makes a difference. And if the interviewers, they're the ones who are telling you how many people they want. I want a list of 3. I want a list of 5. And now there's some rules as far as how many people apply, how many people you have to interview. But that 1 point can make a difference between you get the interview and you don't.
Yeah.
So that's a good point, Nanette. All right. So what happens next, Nanette? What happens when you don't think you have enough and you're feeling hopeless?
So when you're feeling hopeless, so a lot of people, that's one of the biggest things. I know that me and Virginia, when we're kind of like doing our mentorship with the new supervisors, they're like, but I don't have enough on my resume, or I don't have enough kudos to be able to do this. Well, that is what me and Virginia specialize in, is we know how to create that environment where great things happen. So the secret promotion strategy to build your resume and accomplishments. That's what the Lively Office is. We are creating a work culture where great things happen, and we're moving that needle from just everyday toxic chaos to having a smooth, productive workplace. So we know how to take your biggest obstacle. And I know that every company thinks that employees are their biggest obstacle. There's so many things that happens with employees, pay and not showing up for work. And how do you get them to be on board and do what you need them to do when you have to ask them to do something new and they've been doing it for the same way for 40 years? So our Lively Office program, we have a webinar coming up called Employee Keeper, where we're going to teach some of our tactics on what we did to make Lively Office throughout our career, so you can leverage your employees to reach your goals, because your employees really are the way to get to that next level. If you don't have your employees bought in to what you're doing as a supervisor, then you're never going to get to that next level. So we want to give you a free invite to our upcoming webinar called the Employee Keeper. That's where we dive deep into what worked for me and Virginia for 27 years on how we were the go-to people for how to take a toxic postal environment with 7 union contracts and a lot of mad people and turn it into a lively, fun workplace. So if you're interested, it's a 1-hour seminar. There are limited seats, but you can scan the QR code and you can get to learn how our framework on how to shift your culture. So,
all right. And it's absolutely free. So we want to respect your time. We know we're right at an hour. So we want to thank you for attending our webinar today. We hope that it added value to you. We know it's limited when you only have an hour, but we do hope that we helped you do some deep diving to yourself and what you need to do to get prepared and for your next application. Again, we want to extend that invite to you, and also as well as keep in touch with us. We give freebie tips all the time and we love it. We love our employees. You put me into some chaos and some crazy, everybody else wants to run. We're in it.
We're in it.
Those are people, and those are people who add value. They bring value and they're hurting in some kind of way, and they need you to lead them to the right direction. They need you to take control and change that situation. So we have 2 QR codes here. The one on the left side is for our website at the Lively Office. We also have some YouTube videos that are insanely messy, but they still have value. So you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. These are the different ways that you can join us and follow us. Our personal pages are on there as well as our Lively Office. So you can follow us individually and what we do to enjoy ourselves. Nanette will share swamp stories, and I'll probably tell you about something funny I crocheted. So if you want to get to know us that level too, please follow us there. And again, share with your friends if you think this benefits anybody, and you have people who are in leadership or trying to be in leadership and are struggling, join us at our upcoming telecon. We're going to just discuss leadership, discuss work cultures, and give you some tips on things that you can do to change your environment and be happy at work. Laugh and smile. Don't dread it. So thank you guys. There's some chat action here. Maybe it's love. Oh, Gail, do you reverse engineer as well? My daughter has a toxic digital environment. Yes, we do discuss how to like manage your narcissistic boss. We do have some information and we share that because trust me, what you're saying is a common.
Yeah.
It's very common. And I would like to say that I'm expert mode on that. We probably could highlight and there's definitely see a need, fill a need. We'll definitely highlight on how to be an influence and influence your boss to want to change the work culture without you even knowing that you're doing it, which is also like a very tactic skill. So we do hope that you guys enjoyed this. I certainly enjoyed it. I wish I got to see everyone's faces. We do try to ask people to put their cameras on just because we want to have that personal connection with you and get to know you and help you out that way. And we hope to see you at our May 18th event. Thank you, Courtney, for the feedback and Eddie for the feedback. Thank you all of you for attending. We appreciate it. And Antonio and them participating. And I think we had a Becky. We might have lost Becky because we're at the hour. But Nanette, you have anything else?
Just follow us, or you can find us at the Lively office at just about every social media. And if you have any questions or you want any help, even about the webinar today, reach out to us in the direct messages and we'll be happy to help you. We got a heart for the people in the workplace. We know what it's like out there, and we want to make sure that we are an asset to you and lift you up.
All right. And if you can't join, the greatest way to support small businesses is just sharing and liking. So Thank you so much. Have a great one. Bye, everyone.